Welcome to our session that is called The Ups and Downs of Income Volatility, Behavioral Impacts and Opportunities for Micro and Small Businesses. I am Hans Frech. I'm a senior behavioral researcher at the Common Sense Lab at Duke University, and I'm joined by my colleague Emma Martinez, also a researcher at the Common Sense Lab, and Luz Magdalena Salas, Vice President at ANIF, Economics Research Center in Colombia. Today, this session, we're going to talk about one very important challenge that micro and small businesses face around the world, with our focus in Latin America, which is income volatility. We're going to talk a little bit about what is income volatility and what are some of the challenges we're seeing. We're going to talk about the behavioral and psychological challenges associated with income volatility and some of the opportunities that we see as a path forward to help MSEs manage this challenge. The three of us were part of a larger initiative called Strive Colombia, supported by the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. And Strive Colombia has a goal of helping micro and small businesses in Latin America, particularly in Colombia, increase their digitization, increase their access to credits, and more broadly, be able to manage their finances and achieve financial resilience in a much better way. And so the three of us here, which represent two different organizations, we're also going to talk a little bit towards the end about what are we doing to support MSEs in addressing this challenge of income volatility and how our work will support the larger goals of helping MSEs increase digitalizations, grow, gain stability, and increase their financial well-being. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Luz Magdalena Salas, who's going to talk with us a little bit about income volatility and what does this mean for MSEs.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you very much for introducing this important challenge that we've seen in many businesses, not just in Colombia and the rest of the region, but across the world. I am super happy to be able to share this space with both of you, Emma and Hans. As you said, I am from ANIF, and I am happy to be part of this project Strive and talk about this important challenge on behalf also of the Financial Access Initiative at NYU. Today I'm going to talk, I'm going to walk you through how Mi Diario Financiero, I'll explain in a moment how this works and what it is, but how Mi Diario Financiero, my financial diary, helps micro and small enterprises build resilience in the middle of income volatility and uncertainty. Mi Diario Financiero is a multi-channel cash flow diary, to explain a little bit more how it works, and it also allows individuals or MSEs to turn real-time cash flow data into product innovation with financial providers. And in the Financial Inclusion Week this year, you're asking us how we build resilience and well-being in moments of uncertainty. And our answer here, as part of the Strive project, as Hans was explaining, starts with a reality check. Small and micro enterprises face high income volatility. They also experience or are faced with fixed installment products that do not fit these volatile cash flows that they are facing or experimenting in their businesses. And this definitely drives credit exclusion. It also slows growth, and that's one of the things that we found in the Small Firms Diaries project that I'll talk in a moment. But it also affects job stability for their workers. So the time that I have now in this space, during this time, I would like to share with you why using a diary. And our foundation is, as I said before, the Small Firm Diaries study led by FAI at NYU. In this study, we found, or it shows, that many small businesses operate with high income volatility, not just in Colombia again, but across the world. And that volatility shapes their behavior. And let me share with you some of those behaviors that we found in the study. First, owners prioritize stability before growth. So they, instead of just thinking or only thinking about growing, expanding their business, etc., They want to have stable finances and have a stable business. Second, they rely a lot on informal finance, especially when liquidity is tight. So those characteristics are important to understand the behavior or how MSEs make decisions in their daily activities. And thirdly, I wanted to also talk about what a type of credit loans, etc., they prefer. They do not take fixed installment loans, which are the typical type of loans that we find in the standard or the financial system, especially because they do not match with their cash flow cycles. And that's one of the things that we want to deal, or we want to, let's say, consider in this project with Strive Colombia. This, again, is the starting point for our research approach and of our design approach. In practice, weekly cash flows show significant swings in cash in and cash out with unpredictable ups and downs. Most of small businesses don't fail because their product is bad, but instead they struggle because cash flows are lumpy. They have sales are spike one day and the next day they drop, and instead bills and payroll and rent and suppliers arrive on fixed dates, on fixed moments, and they are constant, even when revenue is not like that. So when financial products are rigid, as I said, that we usually observe those, flows are volatile, as I also said, and records are scattered, decision-making for the MSEs becomes really difficult and normally reactive, which means that they are delaying purchases. They are cutting hours for the workers. In contexts like Colombia and like ours, sometimes hiring informal labor is the decision that they have to make, or even turning to expensive and informal loans. So the result of this is a cycle that undermines resilience. And remember that resilience is precisely what our approach in this session and this Financial Inclusion Week this year is, and we are designed to break. So business owners usually tells us the same thing again and again. I need stability before I can think about growing. Mi diario financiero, or my financial diary, helps to address this by turning daily activity, which means every peso or every dollar in, every peso out, into clear, timely information that owners can actually use. So we build this, Mi diario financiero, to move from diagnosis to day-to-day resilience. It makes the reality that they usually, live in, of lumpy cash flows, and they turn it into simple, regular records that we are, turning into practical feedback, so that business owners, can anticipate gaps, they can anticipate time payments, they can protect their teams, their workers, because not every business keeps accounts the same way. And mi diario financiero is exactly that, a multi-channel by design. And what do I mean by a multi-channel? We recognize the heterogeneity of MSEs, and we want to provide each business owner with the tools that they can manage. No? So for example, if a business preferred to write down on a paper the cash flows, they can write it on a paper, they snap it, and they snap a photo, and they send it to the system. Or if they prefer using their phone, they can use it. They can use our WhatsApp chatbot, and they can log income and expenses and keep it in the information system. Or even if they are ready for more structure, they can use a web form, and they can upload their current tools or apps, or integrate their apps into the Mi Diario Financiero system. So no matter the entry point, the data flows into this unified system that has instant owner-facing feedback, which means cash-ins versus cash-out, upcoming liquidity gaps, margin signals, spending behavior, etc. And they can also see high-frequency analytics that gives themselves, and also FSPs, real-time visibility into the capabilities of each business and the dynamics of their cash flows. So Mi Diario Financiero helps improves also product design for FSPs. And I think Hans and Emma are going to talk a little bit more about that later, because those are important to help MSEs to deal with high income volatility. Financial diaries outperform the traditional surveys. In Colombia, as we saw in Small Firm Diaries, they proved both to be feasible and to be valuable to understanding the dynamics of the businesses. And now Mi Diario Financiero brings that approach of Small Firm Diaries into production. And it's not just one study, it's also something that we can repeat. It's a data system, data information or information system that can help strengthen the decisions for entrepreneurs. And there is another key component of Mi Diario Financiero that I would like to share with you today, and it's habit formation. With the daily recording of the inflows and outflows or the cash flows, Mi Diario Financiero helps individuals and MSEs to build a habit of registering this data. And resilience, if you think about it, starts with habit. We keep it simple. We record daily, even if it's just one number, one sale, or one expenditure, we record it every day. We avoid letting records pile up because it's better to make a very small, make it small, daily entries than to wait and to try to reconstruct a whole week or a whole month at once. And finally, we close the week. With this information, for business owners are able to review cash in versus cash out every 7 days or every week. And these small habits reduce errors. And they also make patterns visible, and they most importantly reduce the anxiety that business owners usually experiment in during every day in managing their businesses. So if we later on you will see some testimonials and in which business owners tells us that writing things down in this system or in Mi Diario Financiero reduces the noise in their heads, and it frees attention for customers and operations. And just to finish, how does this translate into resilience? And I would like to share with you three ideas for three concrete ways. The first one is timing. Seeing the information that they register, seeing the next liquidity gap a few days ahead. It helps and lets owners shift purchases, stagger payments, or they can even pull small buffers, preventing a cash crunch from becoming a crisis. The second thing that we with Mi Diario Financiero are seeing is that is prioritization. Sorry, with weekly margins visible, business owners, are able to understand or to behave, to act with that. For example, what to cut without hurting core sales, or they can protect payroll hours for their employees, and they can even keep trusted staff during difficult times. And thirdly, readiness. Documented flows, even though they are simple and they are basic, help build a story of the business. And this is not important only for the business owner, but it is also important for the FSPs and for the system in general. During a shock, that trail helps business owners ask for working capital from suppliers or working capital from formal service providers or credit providers with more clear and with more organized information. So the value of Mi Diario Financiero or this tool is two-sided, even though the business owner is the center of this benefit. For the owners, for the business owners, records create discipline, reduce surprises, and make it easier to justify choices, for example, for family members or staff or suppliers. But also for financial service providers, is a really, really important tool. With high frequency traces, it improves the understanding understanding of real-time needs, of also cash flow dynamics. And that also helps FSPs to understand the repayment capacity of business owners, especially for those customers that do not have or have little credit history. This doesn't mean that every owner wants a loan or needs to take a loan in order to grow their business. It means that when support is needed, providers can innovate using flexible products, but also business owners can show or can be visible for the system, for the whole system. What we've seen in these early cohorts of MSEs in Mi Diario Financiero is that business owner records data are more consistent when we have different types of channels, as I explained before. They have fewer surprise shortfalls after 3 or 4 weeks of registering the information in the system. And they have also something very important, a cleaner or a better understanding of the importance of separating business and personal spending and accounts, which is something that seems very small, but it has a very important or big impact. So, I would say these are, from what we've seen from Small Firm Diaries, that these are the building blocks of resilience, and this is a powerful tool that helps small and micro and small enterprises to understand the high income volatility and to be aware of it and to act using this information.
This is great. No, thank you so much, Luz, for sharing what ANIF is doing with Mi Diario Financiero and how this tool is helping MSEs address this challenge of income volatility. And it's precisely tools like Mi Diario Financiero that are built thinking about sort of like what are the behaviors, what are sort of like the actions, what are the main challenges that businesses and business owners are facing that can help and have a dent on helping people achieve resilience. And so taking a step back from the solution, and we want to kind of like walk you through what are some of the impacts that income volatility has on the psychology of business owners and the people who work with as entrepreneurs. Income volatility poses a series of challenges that can go even further than the direct sort of like financial consequences of having months of more income and months of low income. No? And this is going to help understand why a tool like Mi Diario Financiero can be very helpful for micro and small businesses. Having a volatile income means that sometimes our incomes will be higher, sometimes it will be lower, and that also the frequency in which we receive this income will be irregular and even unpredictable. And this dynamic affects entrepreneurs' psychology and will subsequently also affect their financial decisions, along with the resilience and well-being. And in the research that us at the Common Sense Lab have been doing, trying to understand what are some of those impacts, looking at different studies and reports that have been done, we found that there's like 3 key challenges that entrepreneurs experience psychologically and behaviorally when they are exposed to income volatility. And the first one is that in periods of lower income, or when they're facing income shocks, entrepreneurs might experience what's called a scarcity mindset. And a scarcity mindset is the phenomenon in which people are trying to solve for a particular resource that's in shortage. It could be time, it could be money, it could be space. And when we're trying to solve for that particular resource, we focus our attention almost exclusively on this resource, which in turns means it reduces our cognitive capacity and our attentional bandwidth to pay attention to other things that are happening around us at the same time. That means people who are experiencing a scarcity mindset become very good at trying to solve for that immediate need. We've seen that people who are experiencing income scarcity, for example, are very good at trying to understand the trade-offs between different products they want to purchase. They're very good at finding ways to come up with funds and capital to support their businesses. But doing so, focusing on the short-term aspect of it, means that they might sometimes struggle to consider also the long-term consequences of those decisions they are making in the short term, or even paying attention to other competing priorities and elements that affect their businesses as well. And this is, for example, one of the reasons why informal and predatory lending become very, very attractive for entrepreneurs in this moment, They're very convenient, they're very easy to access, but they typically come with expensive and some harmful consequences in the long run. No? So scarcity mindset is one of those impacts of income volatility on entrepreneurs. And some research even shows that scarcity mindset can go beyond the decisions that people make, with some evidence also suggesting that episodes of scarcity mindset can even have a negative impact on people's physical well-being, on how much sleep and how much quality of sleep people can get, and stress and anxiety levels that they're facing. No, all of which makes it even harder for entrepreneurs to sustain and grow their business when they're facing these impacts of income volatility. Now, secondly, there's research that shows that income volatility also negatively affects people's subjective financial well-being, or the degree to which people feel they can manage their finances in the present and how much they can prepare for the future. All of which is also tied up to how much a business can build financial resilience. Now, this impact on financial well-being is partly explained by a reduction in what it's called entrepreneurs' internal locus of financial control. The locus of control, to put it in other words, is the degree to which people feel that their life outcomes or their financial outcomes in this case are controlled by themselves. That's sort of like the internal part of the locus of control, or to what extent they are determined by external forces and external consequences. We typically see that people who have a strong internal locus of control tend to have a higher level of financial well-being, tend to feel like they're much more control of their finances, and hence tend to make better decisions with their finances as well. And so what this research shows is that facing income volatility, being exposed to income volatility, leads people to shift their locus of control from an internal one to an external one. They start to feel like they don't have enough control, and that the outcomes of their business or their financial decisions are more determined by things happening outside of their control in the environment. So, and that in turn have been shown in some other research that leads to less financial planning, less financial decisions that are tied to long-term outcomes, and also fewer savings for themselves or for their businesses. And thirdly, there's some research that has shown as well that an increased frequency of payments, one of the elements of income volatility is that not only income goes up and down, but also the frequency in which people receive income deposits, payments, sales, that high frequency of payments is also sort of like one element that can influence people's financial decisions. Specifically, it shifts what it's called people's subjective wealth perceptions. And what this means is that when people receive their income at a higher frequency, let's say, for example, think about a particular business that's receiving payments and sales very frequently. People tend to mistakenly perceive that their income is higher than they actually is, which in turn has been shown to lead to an increased level of spending even beyond what they can afford with their current income. So just by shifting the frequency in which people receive their payments, not even changing the amount or how much people get in income, but just like making those payments more irregular, infrequent, and even unpredictable, as it happened with most businesses, can increase their perception of increased spending. This psychological phenomenon, for example, helps us understand why managing our finances and having some visibility into our finances, something that Mediero Financiero is doing very well, can help businesses kind of like increase the predictability and a better understanding of their income as a way to address the challenges of income volatility. No? And it also highlights the need, this is a good example, but it highlights the need of us thinking about financial products and services from a behavioral perspective, so that those products can facilitate the task of managing their finances, growing and achieving resilience for micro and small business. No? And with these three sort of like impacts in mind, I'm going to pass it along to Emma, who's going to talk with us about one specific challenge, one specific area of products that we can think of, and we can start to understand how it can be approached from this behavioral perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Hans. Yes, so as Hans just mentioned, we've done some work looking at specific financial inclusion or exclusion measures in Colombia specifically, and understanding kind of the financial barriers around that. And so we've put together a report actually, which will detail much more than I will share now. But just to give you a little bit of a taste of the research we've been doing, I'll talk a little bit about credit and what that looks like from a behavioral barriers perspective. So obviously there's plenty of exclusion, credit exclusion for MSEs, but there are also psychological barriers that kind of hinder, I guess, the access to formal credit for MSEs. So just quickly starting with maybe why we care, why this matters, right? Obviously everybody deserves equal access, but beyond that, credit is extremely important in a moment when liquidity is low. And with volatile income, this is quite frequent. Credit can also serve as a financial stabilizer, just generally, even for non-volatile businesses, right? But having credit is associated with better business outcomes, with greater investment, and greater consideration of the long term, which, as Hans just mentioned, is very important, and especially in the case of MSEs that have very volatile incomes. It can also mitigate the consequences of income volatility. Physically, right? It can serve as a type of insurance, the liquidity, but also psychologically, it can reduce some of those scarcity mindset impacts, which in turn can have physical and personal benefits. But also, informal credit is very attractive for MSEs. And this can be very dangerous and financially unstable, right? This type of credit is easier to get. It's much more immediate. It's a much less involved process. But also, it has the limitations of much shorter repayment cycles, much higher interest, no legal backing, no protection. And those are the things that can be really dangerous for an MSE or can make their lives more difficult, and why it's extremely important to invite them into this credit space, not just physically, but also removing those psychological barriers. So I'm going to discuss maybe a few of the barriers that we've laid out and a few opportunities, not quite as detailed as might be ideal, but please go ahead and join us in reading the report if you're interested. So one of the biggest barriers, which ANIF actually did a survey on and found that perception and mistrust is a very big barrier. In fact, it was the most commonly reported reason for not applying to formal credit. Friction is also a very big barrier. As I previously mentioned, accessing credit is a very involved process. It is not straightforward. It is not short. It can come with significant time investments and attention. There's a lot of knowledge sometimes required in there, and there's no guarantee of approval. And this can be particularly damaging for an MSE who maybe has negative experiences, that perception, right? So having all these extra frictions added on just makes it unattractive to go for credit again. And then a lack of flexibility. So a lot of products are not actually designed with MSEs in mind necessarily. And so they're not designed for folks that have volatile incomes. High income volatility can make it very difficult to commit to a fixed repayment plan or a fixed repayment quantity, if you will. Businesses don't always earn enough to cover their income and their expenses, let alone a repayment. And if there's a lack of alignment, again, between that the repayment date and when a business's income actually comes in, then at the moment of repayment, a business might not have the liquidity to make that repayment. And there is research that indicates that as little as a 7-day gap between paying expenses and receiving income can actually decrease the likelihood of a business fulfilling its financial commitments. And so that can be very damaging, obviously, as well in the longer term. And so what might some of our opportunities be. Certainly, this is not limited to what I'll share now, but two big ones: designing with MSEs in mind, designing with flexibility in mind. The Center for Advanced Hindsight did a study with a Mexican fintech that found that giving small business owners the flexibility to choose their repayment dates actually increased their perceived likelihood of making their repayments on time. Basically, it offered the opportunity for users to match their payment date with the day that they expected their income to come in, effectively eliminating that gap that contributes obviously to missed payments. And flexibility is not limited either to just the beginning of the process, right? Flexibility on the back end can also be very valuable. Research has found as well that offering emergency reserves, if you will, such as, in the process of repaying a loan or what have you, can actually sustain motivation and goal completion, even after somebody has missed a previous repayment. So allowing me to say, this October, I don't have the money to make my repayment. I'll skip this month and pay next month. Increase the likelihood that I continue to repay, which obviously in the longer term is much better, not just for me personally as a micro and small business, but also for the financial entity that is receiving those repayments. And so I'll just wrap up and say there's much more I could say, but the process of inviting MSEs to move from informal to more formal credit options considers not just the physical barriers, which are very important in and of themselves, but also the psychological barriers, which can not only improve physical financial well-being, but also financial resilience, and can reduce these effects of, for example, scarcity mindset that Hans was talking about, which can then have physical benefits for MSEs.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Emma, for sharing those opportunities and addressing the barriers that we've been exploring around credit access. To wrap up this session, this has been a little taster of what we've been doing, how we've been working with income volatility as part of the Strive Colombia initiative. We're going to talk just very quickly about what are our next steps, what's coming up in the pipeline, what things you should be aware of and keep in mind for the next few months. Emma and I at the Common Sense Lab, and with the support of Luz from ANIF, we're going to be working on trying to implement some of these opportunities and some of these solutions that Emma described with actual financial organizations in Colombia to understand what are the impacts, how do they work, and what's the best way to bring them to fruition so that they can have a benefit for MSEs managing their income volatility. And as Emma mentioned as well, we're going to be putting out a report that more detailedly describes these different opportunities, barriers, and effects of income volatility. And Luz, tell us a little bit about what's up in the next few months for ANIF and Strive Colombia.
Thank you, Hans. Emma, it was really it is always nice to keep on talking about what are the challenges of income volatility, not just in terms of information and data, but also in terms of behavior of MSEs and all the ecosystem around MSEs and MSEs development. What's next for Mi Diario Financiero? Keep testing the tool. That's what I would have to say. We will keep improving Mi Diario Financiero. I think I would summarize those improvements in three parts or in three lines. The first one is we're working in improving or making better the system of information. As I said and explained before, we have the possibility for MSEs to write down in paper and take a photo and upload it in the system. So we are going to improve those frictionless captures of the cash flows, also the chatbot and also the web, in order to, as I said before, integrate all these pieces of information or these ways of or channels and ways to provide more information to the system. We also want to improve the feedback that we provide to MSEs as and not just for MSEs, but also for financial service providers, as Emma was saying. All these innovations are very important and useful, but FSPs need data, need to understand better, and need to be able to understand the cash flows for businesses. So we hope to sharpen a little bit the feedback that we're providing to MSEs. And finally, we want to introduce artificial intelligence to improve the recommendations that we are providing to MSEs using this feedback and using their own registration of their own data, the data that they are actually registering. But also we want to, also along with Common Sense Lab, we hope to be able to send smart nudges to keep records on time, to connect business owners to the rest of the services that Strive Colombia is providing, etc. So the goal still for us is very simple, is helping business owners to run businesses with more information or with better information, or that they can use in order to improve their decision making. And of course, to improve stability and actually make decisions to help them improve or grow more. And I just want to close with something important, which is resilience, which is the topic of this Financial Inclusion Week. Resilience is not just a trendy word or something trendy that we listen all around in different spaces. Resilience, I would like to say that it's the ability, the everyday ability to handle, in particular for MSEs, to handle slow weeks, or to pay their teams, or to restock, and to keep going. So all those characteristics are some actions that respond to resilience. And we believe that Mi Diario Financiero helps business owners to build that ability to actually recording day by day helps build resilience. And just to finalize, I would like to say that we would like to close with a few testimonials from business owners that are currently using Mi Diario Financiero, in which they are actually registering very consistent cash flows for their businesses. So we invite you to see these videos.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Laura Cano, tengo un emprendimiento en la Tebaida Quindío llamado Vanity Salón y hago parte del proyecto Mis Diarios Financieros, el cual me ha servido mucho para organizar mis ingresos, mis egresos, tener un control de mi contabilidad, y lo recomiendo un montón porque te facilita la vida con tu emprendimiento, te hace sentir segura de lo que ganas, de lo que gastas, y te ayuda a organizar tu emprendimiento.
Gracias al proyecto de ANIF de Diarios Financieros he podido empezar a implementar la herramienta de ingresos y gastos en mi emprendimiento, Café de Especialidad Colombiano Coffee. Gracias a esta herramienta he podido organizar mejor mis finanzas dentro de mi empresa. Me ha permitido tener un mejor control sobre gastos, ventas, he podido ver que he escalado en temas de organización y la verdad la recomiendo mucho. Es de mucha utilidad para nosotros los emprendedores.
Joining us.